America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation, and today we're joined by Dan Furman. Dan is the owner of Clear Writing and a regular on Inc.com columnist specializing in small business finance and economic policy. Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Elaine. Thank you for having me.
Well, I know we were just kind of discussing what small businesses mean and kind of that definition of them. And you and I kind of both settled on, we both kind of agree that we're in that Main Street small business realm. Talk to me a little bit about what the definition of small business and what it means to you.
Well, to me, small business, like I mentioned, I believe like the SBA and most conventional wisdom defines small business as anywhere from $1 million to $50 million in revenue or market cap or whatever. A $50 million business is a lot of things. Small really isn't one of them. I would think even the owner of a $50 million business really doesn't think he or she is small. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot that goes on. They probably have a whole bunch of employees. And for example, years ago, my last real job, 25 years ago, I worked for a pocket knife manufacturer, Imperial Schrade. At one time, they were one of the biggest pocket knife manufacturers in the world. They've since gone out of business. They had a factory, they're probably a quarter mile long. You had to ride a bike to get from one end to the other. They probably had 300-something employees, and they would be classified as a small business. And I mean, there's nothing small about that business. So when I talk about small businesses, I'm much closer to Main Street, mom and pop, that type of business. A lot of times in my articles and such, and when I look for an example for a small business, I'll usually use like a tree service company as a really good example of a small business. Somebody who went out and started a company, maybe he started with a chainsaw and a pickup truck, and then eventually grew to have a helper or two, and then he bought a bucket truck, and now you got 3 or 4 people, and eventually you got 2 or 3 crews with a couple bucket trucks and a couple chippers. And to me, that's much more of what I'm talking about as a small business than I am a $30 or $40 million company when I talk about issues related to small businesses.
I always thought, and what I had read, it wasn't that the SBA defined a small business as any company under 500 employees, which I totally agree with you. I mean, if you are working at a company with 3 employees or a company with 450 employees, that's a very different company.
2 completely different things. Completely different things.
The level of sophistication as far as access to capital and how different policies are going to impact you, how you're going to be structured from a tax entity is going to be just so different. You mentioned somebody who starts with a chainsaw and drive around in their truck trimming trees. Are you familiar with a company called Tire Kingdom?
Tire Kingdom?
Uh-huh.
No, I've never heard of them.
So Tire Kingdom was a tire store that started in South Florida, probably in the late 70s, maybe early 70s, and ultimately was grown to be a massive company and then Michelin bought them.
Okay.
But the guy who originally started Tire Kingdom was my neighbor. I grew up with his kids. Just a guy down the street, regular middle class neighborhood, selling tires out of the back of his car. And he would go to the weekly flea market and sell tires. And he grew, everywhere you went on every corner, there was a Tire Kingdom. And he used to have these commercials where he'd wear a crown and he was the Tiger King, right? And those were his local commercials. And I mean, that's the kind of small business story that's pretty incredible to hear.
Yeah, I love stories like that. Yeah, I really like stories of the person who started a business and then just, really grew. And if he started in the 70s, boy, that was not the greatest business climate.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
we were just kids then, but it's,
Yep.
wow,
Yeah.
that was something. That's a good
Those
story.
are the pretty incredible stories. I mean, that's really pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and
Correct.
figuring it out. I mean, I've mentioned to you before we came on air, our founder is Bernie Marcus. He started the Home Depot.
Yep.
He was fired in his late 40s, 49 years old, and said, oh my gosh, I'm going to be bankrupt. What am I going to do? But he had this idea. And he went to a couple of friends and another, Ken Langone, it was a friend of his who had obviously the money to get started. And lo and behold, in the 70s also, and had an idea and said we could put this all under one roof and grew it from there. And, started with a couple of stores in Atlanta and now it's this household name.
Oh, yeah. They changed everything. When you talk big box stores, you're talking Walmart or Home Depot for the most part. When you start talking about that, they definitely changed everything.
But the one thing that people like the founder of Tire Kingdom and Bernie, who founded the Home Depot, and others, Sam Walton, is they all started with that first store, and they all had to deal with figuring out meeting payroll every week. They had to figure out the regulations. They had to figure out how to get access to more money to grow the business, because you can't just keep stuffing it in your mattress and hope that you have enough to open another store. You've got to go out and raise capital to grow the business. And a lot of people don't understand that. And one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you to come on is because there's this huge outcry. You wrote this article about the Fed and what the Fed has done. And there's this huge outcry to lower the rates. And everyone on the conservative side is asking for the rates to be lowered. Our small business owners are asking for the rates to be lowered. But you say that the fact that the Fed has held steady and not increased the rates or decreased the rates says, you know what, everything's going pretty well. Talk to us about your kind of perspective there, because it's different than anything I've seen.
Well, I'm the eternal optimist when it comes to small business. I think when you started your business, when anybody started their business, they didn't say, well, the rates are low, it's a good time to start a business. I don't even think the rates entered their mind when they started their company, when they started their business. And so I always feel that attitude should permeate into running your business almost at all times. I say in my article, I link back to another article that I wrote, and my general tone is always, don't get too wrapped up in the news of the day, the headlines. Your business, it's going to have to thrive through good times and bad, through good economies and bad economies. And I try not to get too wrapped up in what the headlines are and even blaming I can't make it in this economy. Well, if you can't make it in this economy, maybe you're not going to make it. We talk about Home Depot and Tire King, and they started in the 70s. I mean, have we looked at the rates in the 70s? I mean, oh my God, the inflation and I'm old enough to remember. I was a kid, but I'm old enough to remember like gas lines and odd and even days and stuff like that. And these guys started their business and they grew it through those times. And I feel right now like the rates, they're really not that high. They're only high in the context of the zero rates that we had, around COVID and such. And before that, they were fairly low. They're only high in context of that. And I see people screaming about, a 6-7% mortgage and how am I going to buy a house with a 6 or 7% mortgage? And I remember very clearly my wife and I refinancing in, I forget the year, 2002, 2003. I don't know 100% what it was, but we refinanced down to 8%. And man, we were thrilled. We felt like we were robbing them. And so I think sometimes the rates are more noise than anything. And I think that's what it is now. Like you mentioned, people on the conservative side want to see the rates cut. And I think that's because the conservative president is screaming for it. And I do think it's a bit of an echo chamber there. But I don't like going back to small business and mom and pop. And like I wrote in my article, on a $100,000 loan, a 25 basis point cut that everybody's screaming for would amount to $250 a year. I mean, if that's going to keep you from taking out that $100,000 loan, I would argue maybe you shouldn't be taking out the loan then. If that $250 is going to, if that's the difference, so I don't think that the cut is absolutely necessary. I wouldn't argue against it either. I mean, I'm not going to argue against it. My article was more or less, I'm an optimist, and I want to say, hey, look, they didn't cut rates. They don't think the economy needs rescuing. And I don't personally think the economy needs rescuing. I think the economy's doing fine. If they do want to cut rates, go ahead and, they will eventually cut rates. We will see a cut sometime this year. There's no doubt in my mind that we will see a cut at some point this year. But again, that 25 basis points or even 50 basis points is not really going to make that big a difference for Main Street businesses. Certainly not enough for them to stress about, worry about. That's for certain. Now, look, if you're financing $10 million, yeah, the 25 basis points matters. But I don't think we're talking about companies doing that here on this podcast anyway. Mm-hmm. So,
no, I mean, the small business owners that I work with that are saying, gosh, I would really love to get the rate cut. It would really sort of help layer over the Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed. That has the immediate expensing in it. I've got a couple manufacturers who would love to invest in some new machinery. So we're probably talking in that, $500,000 to $1.5 million investment. And a lot of folks would love to see more than a 25 basis rate cut at half to a point, really. It would make a difference. But when you put it in those terms, I see why you're making that argument. I think the other side of it, though, is also on the debt side. What is your sort of perspective on the debt and the interest payments on the debt? Because if the Fed did cut the rates, we'd save a couple $1 billion on interest. It's my understanding.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. But again, now we're talking about the national debt, right? And such. We're talking about the national debt. I want to say, I don't want to quite, that's probably a little above my pay grade in terms of that and the political aspects of that. Of course, it's going to be, of course, if you cut rates, your interest payment on billions and trillions of dollars is going to be less. But again, I would come back to, the rates are really not that high. Are we saying that we can only function as a country if there's 0% rates? I mean, is that what we're saying there? I don't really. First of all, it's also my opinion that the national debt is probably never getting paid down. I don't ever see that ever getting paid down to where it's zero. It's almost going to be an ongoing thing where we just kick that can down the road years and years and years. And, we can get into a whole much bigger discussion on the national debt. I do feel, but then we're getting away from Main Street and small businesses. So, yeah, definitely. If you cut 25, 50 basis points, we'll save tons on the national debt. I don't know how that affects mom and pop all that much, though. So it's hard for me to comment on that without getting too political and without getting way too big picture on that.
Right.
And I definitely have opinions on that, but it's not going to serve your audience too well.
Yeah, it's much more a political question, I think, too.
Kind of.
The you told a story about you and your wife refinancing to 8% and being tickled pink about it.
Yeah.
I can remember buying my first house in the early 2000s and waiting until the rates got down to 7% and being so excited that we were going to get 7% on our first house. So I know that feeling. And I can even
Yeah.
remember I bought a house in 2018 when I moved out of my local town and to where I am now. And I sort of had to remind myself that I actually paid 5 1/8 on the house I bought in 2018, which is interesting because I was able to refinance down to like 3%.
Yeah, you got the COVID mortgage. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. We
exactly.
got one of those too.
Yeah. And so, but I can't even imagine selling the house, right? Because I would pay more than double in interest. So
Correct.
there's all of these sort of consequences, though, of I guess you could say of the low mortgage rates that we had that we're addicted to, and then of the not cutting. And it's kind of a this chase your tail kind of thing. Well, the rates aren't coming down. And so the people who are in their homes don't want to sell their homes because they have to go to a higher mortgage. And the people who are trying to get a home can't get a home because it would save them money. So there's all these consequences. And of course, I mentioned my small business owners that are interested in investing to further take advantage of the policy and the Big Beautiful Bill Act with the immediate expensing. So
Bonus
there's just so many
depreciation. Yeah.
consequences. Yeah, there's so many consequences
Yeah.
that,
That was a good thing. I was very much in favor of that. That was a good thing.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and so you are of the school that this is not a political thing. This is the Fed saying, hey, the economy's in good shape.
If they thought it needed rescuing, they would have cut the rate. If they really thought that it needed rescuing, that we needed some kind of shot in the arm. But we got to remember, inflation was really starting to be a problem. It really was. It was starting to be a problem. And that's when the Fed started raising rates in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
They started raised it the whole year. Every meeting they would raise another 50, 75 basis points. I mean, there was some pretty big raises. There was almost a shock to the system,
Right.
especially since we were addicted to that 0%,
Yeah.
or the really low free, money's free, as free as it could get. But they started raising rates, and it has had the effect that they wanted. It has actually, I think, maybe I'm not too popular saying this with the conservative side, but I feel Powell's done a pretty good job. Although it's not just Powell, he's the spokesman. It's not really just his decision.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of them there that they vote on, but he's the spokesman, so he takes the heat or gets the credit. It goes with the territory. But I feel they've done a pretty good job of getting that soft landing they kept talking about. And I think they've done a pretty good job with that. I do think they want to see, and they probably will end up by cutting the rates because we've become so used to lower rates and lower interest rates. They probably will cut. Like I said, we will see a cut this year. I'm almost certain of that we're going to see a cut. We might even see two. There'll probably be 25 basis points each. I do think part of it is the tariffs. I do think they want to wait a little bit to see what happens with tariffs. I didn't put that in my article because I don't like to get too political on it, but I do think they want to see what the effect of the tariffs are going to be. I don't know how much they're going to affect everything. They want to see how much prices are going to go up. I know they have gone up on certain things. I just bought a new HVAC system for my house. We were without. It was funny. We were without air conditioning last week, the hottest heat wave of the year, and our air conditioner is out. But we bought a new HVAC system, and we had bought a new one last year, and we ended up by getting a lemon. So we had to replace it, and they gave us a full credit for last year, but the prices have gone up. We had to throw some money into the deal. Because prices have gone up now. They said, basically because of tariffs on parts
Mm-hmm.
and such. So prices have gone up with that. So I do think the Fed is a little, they're a little afraid to really immediately lower the rate until they get more of a handle on that. But like I said, they don't see the economy in dire need of rescue.
Mm-hmm.
So they held fast. And I do think that's good news for most small businesses that, hey, things are good. We can't really, the economy, we like to talk about a good economy, a bad economy. I think right now we're in a pretty good economy for most people. There's always going to be people that the economy is never going to be good for them. That's
Right.
just fact of life. But I think right now we are in a decent spot, business wise, employment wise, GDP wise, interest rates wise. I think we're in a pretty good place there. And I think we have a pretty good business climate right now. I am happy bonus depreciation got
Mm-hmm.
boosted up again. I do think that was, I was sad. I've always been an advocate of Section 179 and bonus depreciation. They're basically siblings. And I've always been a proponent of capital investment and buying stuff for your business, and that keeps the economy going. And I do like the government rewarding companies that invest in themselves. I think that's super duper important. I think that's more important to me. Like Section 179 and bonus depreciation are much more important than whatever the interest rate is, of course, to a degree. I mean, we don't want to see, rates at 10, 15%. Of course not. That would be
Right.
very much prohibitive. But where we are now, I think your Section 179 and your bonus depreciation and such are way more impactful to your business than a quarter or 50 basis points on interest.
I love how you refer to the government rewarding business,
Yeah.
that the policy is a reward for investment. I think that's a great way to phrase it. And I know with small business owners, whether it's regulations or taxes, what we tend to see is some of these policies can disproportionately hurt small businesses, Main Street small businesses that we've been talking about, because the regulations can just be such a time suck. They can take so much time. They cost more for small businesses in proportion to how big they are, how much revenue they're bringing in. A large company, even what we talked about, one of the large small companies, if you've got 450 people
Yeah.
and you're dealing with regulations and so forth, you've probably got a general counsel and you've probably got a chief financial officer on board internally who are, focused on the needs of your company and dealing with whatever regulations are coming at you in your industry and whatever new taxes are coming. And you also have those people who are looking for the benefits, the beneficial policies, the deductions that might exist for you. If you're sort of a one-man show, the chief cook and bottle washer of your company, you're the guy turning on the lights, you're the guy
Yep.
taking out the garbage, you're the guy
Yep.
locking the door, answering the phone, you're taking the messages, and you don't have the time to look for that deduction that might help you, save a couple $1,000s every year on your tax bill.
Yep. Yep. Well, that's partly why I write my articles. I always get a Section 179 article in every year. I get a capital investment article in every year. I try to do that. I do feel that, yeah, a lot of times the regulations, like you're talking, can hurt businesses. I think a lot of times the regulations are put in place with the right idea in place. Usually they're safety oriented or environmentally oriented. I think that their heart is in the right place, but I think sometimes it just goes about wrong and a real pain in the butt. I don't know if I can curse on this or not, so I'll leave it at that. But I'll give you a good example of it's a big picture example, but I'll give you a good example of how I think overregulation can sometimes be a little silly. I recently bought a new truck like a year or two ago, and I was saying I wanted one. I didn't like the fact that it turns off at the stoplight. I didn't like that. I don't like that at all. I don't think anybody likes that.
No, I totally
And
agree with
the
you.
salesman said, well, you're out of luck because they're all made like that now. You have to have it. And I'm like, well, why did they do that? Like, what did they do that for? And I found out, at least from my research and what I could find out, that it was more or less to get the entire fleet's gas mileage to a certain place. So I understand kind of the reasoning behind that. Better gas mileage is better for everybody, for the most part. However, not if you're going to make my truck stop at every stoplight and turn off. I don't like that. I don't think anybody likes that. So I turn mine off. But to me, that's almost like you're regulating to the point where it's really inconvenient and annoying. And I'm saying that at the consumer level. I'm sure at the business level, it was worse for everybody saying, now we got to make our truck. Now we got to put this in our car, and it's going to cost us a fortune to do this. And so, yeah, I could see sometimes where overregulation just so less regulation is always pretty much more welcome. I mean, I don't want to tell people they can dump the toxic stuff in the river either, but for the most part, I think sometimes the regulations can be really, really stifling. Again, the heart's in the right place. Sometimes the implementation is just not that good. So
yeah, I love that example. I have that same feature in my car. My daughter has it in her car. And we both always turn it off. But I always hear people complain about that feature. I actually think it's dangerous because
I do too.
When we pull out of our neighborhood, we kind of have like this slope to get out of the neighborhood and pull onto traffic. Yep. There's like a bog in the vehicle when you go to start up again. And I don't trust that the car will actually go. It's like,
it's disorienting. It really is.
And I'm always
I turn mine off. They have a switch. They all have a kill switch to turn it off. I turn mine off every time. It's like now it's muscle memory. I turn on my truck and boop, I turn that right off right away.
Yes. Yeah. So, but it's funny. I've seen that written about and talked about on TV as an example of something they're so happy that the auto manufacturers are going to get rid of because everyone hates it across the board.
Yeah, nobody likes it. Oh, are they getting rid of it? I haven't paid attention to. Are they getting rid of that?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. But now you got to buy a new car and pay a higher interest
rate.
No,
keep mine. Just mine will be worth less now when I trade it in because I got this wonderful feature on it. But yeah, whatever. I won't worry too much about it. Yeah. I like my truck. I'll have it for another 6-7 years, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Because if, like I said, you got to pay a higher interest rate. I just actually got a new car, and the interest rates are very high, even for somebody with, a pretty good credit. I mean, like it wasn't a credit score issue, and the guy even said, he's like, you've got a good credit score, but unfortunately the rates are where they are. And I was kind of surprised. It's the highest car rate I've paid in a while.
What is the rate, if you don't mind me asking?
It was a little over 7%.
Okay. See, I remember I sold cars, 1994, I think. And I remember my father coming in and he bought a car from me because he needed a car. And he's like, well, I'll buy one for my son. And I remember he really wanted that rate at 7.5%. He was adamant. I want 7.5%. And that was considered a really good rate. Oh. So again, it's all a matter of, now I realize now 1994, like we were alluding to before, was almost 30 years ago now. Yeah. 31 years ago. So I am talking history there, but again, it's all a matter of perspective in that. I do agree with you though now that it would be sticker shock. It would be sticker shock now coming from there. 7% now is considered a lot on a car loan based on where we were the last few years. And I do think that's part of the, not so much problem, but it's part of the conversation when we talk about rates, that we're looking at very recent history as to whether they're high or not. But again, my own message is basically to small businesses, be optimistic, stay the course. 25 basis points isn't going to matter to your success or failure. There's there's so many more other factors that are going to determine that than 25 basis points.
So what's your advice broadly to a small business owner right now is considering making an investment, taking loans?
Do it. If you need a piece of equipment to expand or whatever, I would do it. Even if you do it now and we cut 25, 50 basis. First of all, I don't think we're ever going back to the 0% or those super low percentages. I don't I don't foresee going back there again. I don't have any concrete evidence for this. It's just my gut feeling, but I don't think we're ever going back there again. I think we will see some rate cuts, but I don't think it's going to be that drastically different. And even if we do get back to a fairly low point, it's going to take quite a while. I don't see them shocking the economy with anything more than 25, maybe a 50 basis point cut at some point. I don't see it going much lower than that. I don't see a bunch of cuts in a row where we're going to be down to the baseline of 2% or what. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So if you're a small business that, my tree company that I'm talking about, and you're looking at a new bucket truck because you need it, go buy it. Definitely go buy it. And don't let the interest rate stop you. And if the interest rate really is on your mind, if your credit's good enough, you can always refinance later. You could always refinance if you have to. If that 25, 50, 75 basis points really is going to matter, you can always refinance later. But if you need it now, go get it now. Go get that and put it in the field and start earning revenue from it. That's always, I did a lot of writing for an equipment finance company for, 15 years, Crest Capital down in Atlanta. And I did a lot of writing and marketing work for them. And I had many late night email conversations with the president about the economy and rates and stuff. And I did a lot of trade publication articles for Crest. That eventually led to me writing for Inc., as a matter of fact. But that was always the gist of a lot of my articles and a lot of my thought process in small businesses and financing and capital expenditures. If you need it, go get it. Go buy that equipment, put it in the field and use it to earn revenue. It's gonna earn you more, especially if you need it. If you're that business and you need it, it's gonna earn you more than that 25 or 50 basis points is going to cost you. So if you need it, go get it. That's my advice. That's the short phrase of my long-winded answer. If you need it, go get it.
Got it. Well, Dan, I appreciate you coming on and giving us your perspective today. I love your optimism. I think small businesses are an optimistic group at heart, no matter what. So
it's how they started. Nobody started a business thinking it's going to fail. They all started starry-eyed and with with all sorts of ambition. And again, never lose that. Now, it's no guarantee you're going to make it, but never, ever lose that. You didn't think about interest rates when you started the business. Maybe you shouldn't let them bother you too much now.
Right. Well, tell everyone where they can read your work and follow you on social media if you've got a social media account.
Well, my website is clearwriting.com with a dash in between the clear and the writing. So www.clear-writing.com. That's the best place to find me. You can read me on Inc. I'm on Inc.com. Just look for Dan Furman, Furman. I'm on LinkedIn. I do a little Twitter. I don't do a whole lot of Twitter. I'm not super huge on the social media. I probably should be, but I'm not. I prefer to write my articles and such. Who knows though? If I get a lot of people calling me, if they watch this podcast and I get a lot of people calling me, I'll probably post a little more. But that's where you can find me. Find me at my website, clear-writing.com.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in again. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.